Well, I hope you're having a fantastic day, and we're so glad that you chose to take some time out of your busy schedule to join us here today. And I think you're going to be really glad you did because, resilience is talked about a lot today. And today we have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Stephen Sideroff about negotiating resilience. So, welcome, Stephen. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Cindy. It's a pleasure to be here.
And for those of you who may not know him, Dr. Stephen Sideroff, he's an internationally recognized expert in resilience and also in optimal performance, addiction, neurofeedback, alternative approaches to stress and mental health. And goodness knows we are dealing with a lot of that in today's crazy world. And he's also an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences at UCLA School of Medicine, as well as the director of the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Ethics. So he comes to us with a lot of chops, and get your pads and pens or laptops or whatever your preferred instrument is ready to grab some golden gems. So tell us, Stephen, how did you come to specialize and work on resilience? You've got this really interesting background.
Well, I really wanted to find the way I can help the most people in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And when we think about life and the struggles that everybody goes through, stress is the consequence of all of this.
Yeah.
And we know that chronic stress is a silent killer.
Yeah.
And it's affecting our health, but not only that, it also affects our performance. A lot of people have this myth that they do better under stress. And it really is a myth because it's been shown that while we may subjectively think that literally our reaction times go down under chronic stress, and a lot of other cognitive measures of cognitive performance go down under chronic stress.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, I was laughing not at what you were saying, but because when you said about that myth that we perform better, I don't think I was consciously aware of it at the time, but I certainly bought into it. I was always a last minute Charlie. I remember back in high school and university, always getting my essays at the last minute, those assignments at the last minute. I'm totally dating myself here, but back before we had this sophisticated technology, it was like the old fashioned typewriter and you had to get the white out, and I'm looking at the clock and
I remember those days.
Now, there's a lot of talk these days that the younger generation doesn't have the required resilience to be able to handle stressful, stressors in life. I'd love your thoughts on that, being the resilience expert.
Well, I think there's two things at play here. When we talk about these days and younger people, the fact is that our civilization keeps speeding up, and it speeds up exponentially. And as it's speeding up, we are getting further and further away from the environment in which our stress response developed from an evolutionary perspective, the fight or flight response. So life is going by faster and faster, which causes us to keep engaging that stress response mechanism, but yet it doesn't match the stresses that we actually deal with. And so we mobilize our bodies, but how many of the stresses in your day are you going to either fight or run from? Almost none. So we mobilize this energy, which takes a lot of our personal energy, and then we have to hold that energy in, which creates tension, constriction, interferes with the flow of energy. So I would say, on the whole, we're all susceptible to these higher levels of stress. What I would say about the younger generations is that they've developed with computer screens, cell phone screens that shift so frequently from one thing to another that we get conditioned to this shifting, which is not what our brains and bodies have adapted to. So again, we move further and further away in this process where the ability to adapt is a key function of our brains and our bodies to stay in a place of balance. And all the things we're talking about keep throwing our bodies and our brains further and further out of balance.
That totally makes sense to me. And I mean, it's funny when you talk about that evolutionary, because it's like, We're not facing the saber-toothed tigers anymore, and yet our body, that adrenal response is kicking in. I love that. Although I will say, even with my own kids, if I had it to do over again now, sort of the, what do they call it? The snowplow parenting, right? Where I didn't let them fail enough. And I should know better because I recognize the value of failure. I mean, I wish I'd had failabrations with the kids so that we celebrated those failures and what we could learn from them, because I think it does decrease that resilience, right? That ability to get
I,
up and brush
it's
yourself.
a very good point. And in fact, I don't use the word failure. I use the term learning experiences
Mm,
because that's how we want to see
yeah,
what's labeled as failure, what's labeled as mistake. We want to
yeah,
see those as opportunities to learn.
absolutely.
Anytime we engage in any behavior, and this is so important, and this is part of my idea of a growth mindset. Every time we have a challenge, no matter how we no matter what the result, there's always something to be learned from those experiences that help us grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that perspective. And I think it's a game changer when we can buy into it. And I encourage for all of our listeners in your parenting, start really reinforcing that with your kids from the youngest possible age. Now, I'm sure my listeners get sick to death of hearing me say it, because I really believe when we talk about negotiating, negotiating our mindset is our first and most important negotiation. So, what advice do you have for us on how we can negotiate our mindset so that we show up with more resilience in our lives and better handle some of those stressors you were talking about?
Well, that's a great question. It's a great way of framing it. I want to take a step back first because when we talk about stress and people's difficulties, and we'll get into this, but it's so important to realize that within a certain range, stress is useful. That's why people feel like stress is good because it can be within a certain range.
Yeah.
It helps us mobilize, it helps us
Yeah.
get focused.
That's
So it
true.
does serve us. The problem is most of us overshoot that range.
Yeah.
And so the key is finding your stress sweet spot, as I like
Okay.
to say.
I like that.
So back to negotiating, and there's two really things that come up for me when I think about negotiating. One is to recognize that the voice that we hear 24/7 is a voice that developed out of our childhood environment
Mm,
and out of lessons of our childhood, which include a lot of negativity, which
yeah.
include a lot of judgments, criticism, negative approaches, focusing on what can go wrong,
Yeah.
focusing on difficulties. And in my work, I like to say that anytime you notice an upset, you can trace it to some message that you're giving yourself that's a negative,
Yeah.
judgmental, critical. Even when you're stepping into a difficult situation, that voice might get concerned. Oh, you're going to make a mistake. Be careful. You don't know what you're doing. They're going to judge you, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so I like to tell people that we want to start developing a healthy internal voice
Yeah.
to negotiate with the existing
Yeah.
internal voice. And the healthy internal voice comes from a place of love, compassion, acceptance, support, care, and I've added joy.
Yeah.
So these are the qualities that we all would have wanted in our parents.
Yeah.
And so it's time to bring those into your own life by creating that as a healthy internal voice. So when you notice some upset, what's that voice saying to you that's causing that? And then begin negotiating with this positive, healthy voice that gives you very different messages.
Yeah. And what a game changer that is, Stephen. Like, my gosh, when I think it, it's become trite now to say, but it's true with that our inner critic, that in negative inner voice. My
Right.
gosh, we talk to ourselves in ways that we would never talk to certainly anybody we cared about, probably not even our worst enemy, frankly, right? So
Yes, yes, yes. But those are the lessons that we learned in our
yeah,
earliest
yeah,
survival learning. And because it went in as survival
yeah,
learning and early, even before we had language,
yeah,
by the way, it's created the neural network in our brain, our default neural network mode.
Yeah.
And so we believe automatically that it's right, it's the truth, even when it says negative things about us.
Yeah.
And it's time to realize, everybody, that all of that has been conditioned and it's not who you are. And it's time for you to go to the healthy voice so that you negotiate the true you, who
Yeah.
you are.
I love that. And start practicing it. I mean, now the science support, they used to say that you can't change your neural pathways. Well, guess what? You can. Now, I want to circle back. You had talked about a growth mindset before, and that really hit me because I remember first reading Dr. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. And I got to say, it was an eye opener on that growth versus fixed mindsets for me. And I
Yes,
think most lawyers in particular think that they're growth mindset, but boy, it made me rethink my strategy because we're so used to succeeding early in life, typically,
right,
that we're afraid of taking chances to look stupid or fail. And
right.
so I'd love, tell us about your strategies to engage a positive growth mindset and why
Yes,
that's so important.
yes, certainly. And before I respond to that, I want to talk about different levels of mindset.
Yeah.
And what in my book, I talk about different levels of neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
So neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to rewire itself.
Yeah.
Okay. But the the growth mindset that most people have in mind is my level 2 neuroplasticity.
Okay.
And that's where we learn new things, but we stay within the boundaries set up in childhood.
Uh,
So yes, new learning, but don't go outside of those
yeah.
boundaries. So if you're someone that feels like you don't know how to dance, don't even try to dance. Stay within. Level 3 neuroplasticity is when you challenge those beliefs. It's when you say, no, I want to learn for myself. I want to decide for myself what I'm capable and not capable of doing. And I'm going to push beyond those boundaries. That's for me the third level of neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
which I encourage in my book. And so when we talk about a growth mindset, I changed the definition of resilience. So it's no longer the ability to bounce back.
Yeah.
It's the ability to bounce forward.
Oh, I like
So,
that.
you know, for example, a lot of people will, you have an important event happening tomorrow and
Yeah.
you'll start worrying about it. Am I going to do well? What's going to happen? And the event happens and you do really well. Resilience is bouncing back, is what the brain takes away from that is when I worry, I do well.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Bouncing forward, bouncing forward is, I did really well. I don't really need to worry for the next event
Yeah.
because I'm capable. I'm good. I need to let go of this worry and anxiety and take on this new sense of my capabilities and abilities. That's the growth mindset that I encourage. And that's the definition of resilience is bouncing forward.
Yeah. That is a powerful distinction. I don't think I've ever heard that before. I like that idea very, very much. Now, you talk about creating zones of safety sort of in our day-to-day lives to help with,
Right.
recovery from that. So what are they and like how can we create them?
Okay. Well, so think about your day. Go through your day and think about all of the triggers of stress, right?
Yeah.
All the things that you're concerned about that, whether it's paying a bill, it's meeting having a conflict situation. Throughout the day, we have one challenge after another, one stress after another. Our nervous system is not designed that way.
Yeah.
Our nervous system has two branches to it. The sympathetic branch that activates to stress, but then it has another very important branch, the parasympathetic, that needs to take over so the body recovers all the resources used up during the stress.
Okay.
But instead, we go from one stress to another throughout the day. So zones of safety are times in your day that you identify, you locate, you intentionally look for, and it could be only 5 minutes between two different appointments where you say, I'm safe, I could let down my guard, and I can breathe and relax so that I do some recovering before the next stressful event. And you want to find these throughout your day. And I really encourage people in particular to consider their meal times as a zone of safety.
Yeah.
Right now, we have so much gastrointestinal diseases, issues, because people sit down to eat, in which they need to have an active digestive system, but they are feeling stressed and thinking and worrying and problem solving. And when you're stressed, your body wants to shut down your digestive system.
Wow. Well, and you add to that, we have the big thing now is the working lunch, right? So we really don't allow ourselves any time. And I want to really put a pin in that for our listeners as well, because we don't hear enough about space, right? And we talk, and I'd even draw a distinction. I love what you're saying, Stephen. I'd say, and rather than saying find the time for it, make the time for it, right? Like we always make this day way to, oh, well, make the time to create space for yourself and recognize the power of the pause, right? And people
Yes,
see it as downtime and wasted time, but I find, for me at least, when I allow myself that space and grace, that's when some of the best ideas will come to me, and creative bursts, or at the very least, I'm able to come back then with a renewed sense of sort of focus and energy, having let go of so much of it. So that's great advice. And let's
absolutely.
amplify that for a bit. I understand you've got like a simple 2-minute exercise that we can use to create relief. So maybe this would be a great time to sort of segue to that. Can you, do you mind sharing that with us?
I'm happy to, and I think it's probably one of the best things for people to do and to practice. I talk about two different relaxation exercises, and this is important because this is what I do a lot when I've worked with peak performing athletes, Olympic athletes,
Yeah.
professional athletes. There's two different forms of doing a relaxation exercise. The one is when you're in a zone of safety, when you can totally let down your guard.
Yeah.
And when I refer to that as a one finger exercise, and you take your thumb and you put it on your pulse of your left hand,
Okay.
and you could feel your pulse. And you could do this with your eyes closed because you're in a zone of safety. But right now, let's do my other exercise,
Okay.
which I call a calm focus. And this is what you can practice because we talked about the dysregulation between our fight or flight response and our
Yeah.
environment. Well, what you want to train yourself to do is to have a stress response that I refer to as a calm focus. You want to be focused, you want to be motivated, but you want to be calm in the process because the stresses we encounter, we can stay calm with. So that's my 2-finger exercise
Yeah.
with my left 2 fingers on the pulse of my right wrist.
Okay.
We'll do that right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So to begin with, just notice your pulse and notice how your body feels. And as I said, this we can do with our eyes open
Hmm.
because we want this to generalize to
Okay.
our everyday life. Okay. Now, I'd like you to begin focusing on your breath and breathe approximately 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out. And you can approximate that, and some people can do 5 in and 6 out, but around that rate. And the reason is that when you breathe at this rate, you are aligning a number of physiological systems in your body. And already when you breathe at this rate, you are encouraging balance. And now on the exhale, imagine your body sinking or melting into the chair. So on the exhale, release any tension in your body.
Mm, I literally sunk lower.
Right, right. And now when you breathe in, I want you to imagine breathing through your heart. So breathe in through your heart, and on the exhale, feel your body letting go. And as you breathe in through your heart, imagine your heart expanding as you breathe in. And on the exhale, release shoulders, release arms, release jaw. Now we're going to add one more element. We know that the body goes into optimal physiological state with positive emotions. So now as you breathe in, I want you to think of somebody you have gratitude toward and feel a sense of gratitude as you breathe in through your heart. On the exhale, just focus on letting go. Breathe in, expand your heart with gratitude. And then on the exhale, feel a release. Breathe in gratitude. And on the exhale, totally accept yourself as you let go. Breathe in gratitude, expand your heart. Breathe out total self-acceptance and letting go.
That is powerful.
So it turns out that when we go into a positive state of emotion of gratitude and appreciation, so first of all, the goal of that exercise is to bring our heart rate into what we call coherence, where when you breathe in, your heart rate speeds up. When you breathe out, your heart rate slows down. So we bring the two branches of our nervous system into balance. It turns out to me that when we go into a state of gratitude and appreciation, we enhance this perfect rhythm.
Yeah.
Now, when we're in a negative emotional state, frustrated, angry, annoyed, our heart rate rhythm becomes chaotic. We lose that coherence. Now, here's another interesting point. Very interesting. If you and I were in the same room, if you and I were standing next to each other, and I put an electrode on your scalp, and I monitored your heart, your breathing, I monitored your EEG, your electroencephalogram, your brain waves, I would be able to pick up my heart rate pattern in your brain waves.
Wow.
Amazing?
It is. We are amazing creatures. And I've got to say, Stephen, I mean, that is such a simple exercise. And that was, for me, that was so powerful. And for our listeners, I hope you actually did that along with us. And if not, I encourage you, re-listen to this episode and actually go through that exercise so you really embody it, and share this episode with other people and direct them to this particular exercise. I felt physiologically and psychologically, it was, at one point I felt like, the Grinch with my heart expanding, going 10 sizes bigger. It's fabulous. No.
Cool.
I love that. Now, you also, I read you're known for your portal cueing system for restoring balance. It made me think of Outlander and time traveling to exotic places. But I'm assuming it is not that. So what is the portal cueing system and how does it restore balance for us?
Okay. So what we're trying to do as part of the process of becoming more resilient is re-engaging our brain and body's ability for neuroplasticity, for change, right? To change, you have to be persistent and consistent, right? And so I could do a relaxation exercise and I could feel myself letting go as we just did.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you 20 minutes from now, that tension will come back because our bodies have muscle memory, right? And so what we need to engage on a regular basis is some way of remembering to check in. Okay. So the portals is my cueing system, and I use one of the things that we do throughout the day, which is go through portals, go through doorways as
Okay.
a signal. So
Yeah.
every time you go through a doorway, go through a portal, I invite everybody to take a moment and check in with your body.
Yeah.
How calm is my body? Let me take a few breaths, let go of any tension,
Yeah.
remind myself of being present in this moment,
Yeah.
because in this moment is the only time you have an opportunity to change, grow, transform.
Yeah.
If you're up in your head, you can't.
Yeah. I love that. It's fun. Thank you for reminding me of that because as you were saying that, Stephen, I realized I used to do that. Like, because I used to litigate like a maniac, right? Like I'd have here 5 days a week. It was not a healthy or sustainable life. But I would make a point. At one point, I finally thought, okay, I don't want to be bringing that home. So, just before I would step into the front door, I would take a second and literally just tap the door jamb and say, okay, who do you want to be when you cross this threshold, Cindy? I'm now coming in. I want to, I want to be a present mother. I want to be, a loving partner or whatever. And it made a difference. And I haven't done that in a while. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah. And these are some specific tips I actually use when I talk to groups of lawyers and
Yeah.
litigators, is
I bet.
that if you want to be at your best,
Yeah.
you have to find ways of balancing the two branches of your nervous system and finding your stress sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Now tell us a bit about your book, The 9 Pillars of Resistance. What are the pillars? If you can give us sort of a Cole's Notes version of it.
Well, so first of all, this is my model of resilience that really is a model of optimal functioning. It covers everything involved in functioning at your best and for your best to your body to heal at its best as well. So, this is based on my own learning and experience. And so 2 years ago, there's now a way that you can get your biological age. Are you familiar with that or aware of
No.
that? Yeah. So looking at the cells in your body through cell methylation,
Yeah.
you can actually detect how fast or slow your body is aging
Wow.
as opposed to your chronological
Yeah.
age. It's your real aging of your body.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, I did this, and my biological age was 20 years younger than my
Nice.
chronological age. And it's because of the 9 pillars of resilience. And basically, it's looking at everything that's involved in living your best life. So I'll run through the 9 pillars for you.
Yeah.
So the first three have to do with relationship. The first is your relationship with yourself, and we've
Yeah.
touched on that. The second is your relationship with others.
Yeah.
And that has to do with being able to discriminate healthy relationships with toxic relationships.
Yep.
And we want to do our best to control the environment that we live our lives in and spend more time with healthy relationships
Yeah.
where we can let down our guard and take in emotional nourishment versus toxic relationships where we have to keep our guard up
Yeah.
and stay in the stress mode.
Yeah.
The third pillar is relationship with something greater.
Mhm.
And this is spirituality.
Yeah.
It's finding meaning and purpose in your life. It's giving service, and it's connecting to the larger community.
Yeah.
This is something that is consistently found in blue zones, areas in which people live a long life.
Yeah.
The next three have to do with balance and mastery. The fourth, which we've already touched on, is physical balance and mastery, where you want to keep the two branches of your nervous system in balance, finding relaxation techniques, using portals to check in with your body, things like that.
Yeah.
Zones of safety.
Yeah.
Mental balance and mastery, we've touched on that. That's having a growth mindset. So if you notice something that you feel you're not doing well enough in, you don't just settle for it. You
Yeah.
say, how do I grow along this dimension?
Yeah.
It's a positive mindset. Many of us, we encounter a stress, a challenge, and we start off going down the negative path. I don't know if I'll be able to do it. This is
Yeah.
going to be difficult. People are going to judge me. And so you want to stop and shift into the positive mindset of, okay, let me do my best here. I want to do as well as I can. The next is emotional balance and mastery. And I mentioned how positive emotions affect us physiologically, but most of us carry what I refer to as emotional unfinished business around with us.
Yeah.
Resentments, gripes, things we're still upset about.
Yeah.
Sometimes we continue to be angry at ourselves for mistakes that we made. All of this is excess baggage that puts a burden on our nervous system balance. And so you want to go through processes to let go of anything that you're carrying. In my book, I go through a whole set of processes to help people let go of unfinished emotional business, mistakes that they've made. The last three are how we engage in the world. Presence. Am I aware of my surroundings?
Yeah.
Do I notice? I had a client once who was referred to me because she was in an automobile accident and she was suffering some symptoms from that. And as I took her history, she said, I've been in 5 accidents in the last two years.
Wow.
And the kicker, she said, and I wasn't at fault in any of them. And I'm scratching my head. How can you have 5 accidents?
Yeah.
And as she walked out the door, I noticed that she bumped into furniture that was alongside the exit.
Yeah.
And I realized this woman wasn't fully aware of her environment to see a car that she needed to avoid
Yeah.
soon enough, right?
Yeah.
And so awareness of what's in your environment. But then the other part of presence is, what's the energy that I'm putting out into the world that impacts other people?
Yeah.
The next is flexibility, and that's ability to make adjustments. If you have obstacles in your path, can I shift my path? Can I shift my goals for greater success?
Yeah.
Flexibility is also being able to put myself in other people's shoes, shifting my perspective for greater ability to problem solve. And then my last pillar, which usually people focus on, but for me, it sits on top of this pyramid of the other 8, is power, which I define as the ability to get things done.
Yeah.
And that's having focus, concentration, persistence, consistence, but most of all, the courage to overcome your fears, to take action.
Well, that for our listeners out there, I hope you had a pad and pen or laptop, as I say, because that was an absolute masterclass right there on how to negotiate a fabulous, balanced life. And so definitely check that out, the 9 pillars of resistance. If you want to knock 20 years
Resilience.
off your life.
Resilience,
Oh,
not
did I say
resistance.
resistance? Sorry, the 9 pillars of resilience. Yes. And knock 20 years off your chronological clock. You can't beat that. And it's funny when you talked about awareness of your environment. I mean, all of that resonated, but that really struck a chord with me as well. Because, we moved 20 years ago up. We live on this lake. It's gorgeous here. We've got property. And before I had my epiphany to switch out of that sort of, legal focus driven mindset, I don't know that I fully appreciate. And all of a sudden, one day I just started really paying attention, taking a look at the leaves changing color or listening to the water lapping on the lake and all. And as I allowed myself to become aware, it was remarkable, Steve, more and more birds. And now like I could distinguish between a cacophony of birds and different animal. It has been a real shift for me to just elevate that awareness of our environment, literally as well as sort of metaphorically. So,
yeah, and that's an important lesson for everybody that, going out in nature is a very powerful way of helping you resonate with nature, and your body wants to go into a place of balance.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talk about the power of a pause. Like I've taken lately to just lie down and, before I go to bed out on the back deck and just look up at the stars. But it just puts things in perspective, and it's Now, what was one of the, speaking of your book, what was one of the most surprising or shocking things that you discovered, either while researching or writing it? Anything really jump out at you?
Well, right from the beginning, what was striking and was that I gave my first workshop for executives in 1980,
Wow.
and people all came up to me and said, "Great, I loved what you said. It's eye-opening. I'm going to go out and follow what you said." And 2 or 3 months later, I'd reach out to some of them to check in, and none of them were following any
Yeah.
of what they learned. And so that began my research on the reasons for resistance to managing stress. So that was really my biggest eye opener, is how we have this resistance. And then was the realization of the mismatches that I've talked about, and that most of our successes have been associated with stress, so that people are biased toward becoming stressed.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to realize we can talk about stress as a useful tool, but only if you keep it within that
Yeah.
range.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing, Cindy, is that when you become more resilient, you are actually able to push that curve further out.
Yeah.
You expand your stress sweet
Absolutely.
spot,
Yeah.
because you can experience more stress without it having a negative effect on you when you're more resilient.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, talk about that Freudian slip. The fact that I said resistance instead of resilience about your book, and then here we are talking. And for our listeners, I didn't send the questions to Stephen. I have no idea what his answers are. This is a totally organic conversation. So that's very funny. Now, Stephen, I understand you've got a gift for our listeners. Do you want to tell us
I
about that?
I do. So the gift is a resilience assessment booklet. It's an ebook, and it describes all my 9 pillars of resilience. But most important, it has a questionnaire that everybody can take, self-score, and derive their personal resilience profile. You could see which are your areas of strength and which are your areas that you need to engage a growth mindset to get better at.
Yeah, I love that. And and do you have the link now? We'll put it in the show notes for our listeners, but do you happen to have it handy?
Let's see. Actually, I'll send it to you so you could put it in
Yeah,
the
no worries.
link
I,
in the
I think
show
we've got
notes.
it. So we'll make sure to put that in the show note for our listeners, and make sure to take advantage when when an opportunity presents itself. Make sure you actually embrace it. That would be my advice. Now, where can people learn more about you,
So
Stephen?
my website is drstephensideroff.com. That's Dr. Stephen with a PH, Sideroff.com. And a lot of other information on there. You can also go to Psychology Today and look me up, because I've written a bunch of articles for Psychology Today as well. But most of the things are on my website, and you'll learn a lot more there, as well as a free audio download of a relaxation exercise as well.
Nice. I'll be taking advantage of that myself for sure. And I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had personally in your life? Doesn't have to be about what we're talking about at all, just something that changed the way you see things or show up.
I would say recently, when I've been under a lot of stress and I realized how it pervaded my day, even when I wasn't under stress, it was an eye opener for me. And it reminded me to use portals, to check in, and more frequently throughout my day to say, right now, I don't have to stress, I don't
Yeah.
have to activate, I can calm myself down.
Yeah.
So it's the pervasiveness of stress that I was awakened to most recently.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful to you truly about that reminder about the portals, because it's such an easy way for us to bring more intentionality to our life, right? What we
Right.
choose. Just we're constantly going through doorways every day, and
That's right.
whether you're going into a meeting, whether you're coming home from work, when you're, if you're got younger kids, going in to say goodnight to them. I mean, every one of those, just take that opportunity to get intentional about.
Absolutely. And particularly when you come home at night and walk into your home,
Yeah.
that's a signal that you left work and you could let down.
Yeah. And it goes back to that neuroplasticity. It allows us to retrain our brains, right? I
That's
think
right.
that's beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
Stephen, thank you so much for taking time. I know this has been just super enlightening for me. I got a ton of value from it. So thanks so much for joining us and sharing your insights.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And for our listeners, I hope you got even a fraction as much value as I did from this episode. And as I said, even just do that 2-minute exercise and give the gift of sharing. When we get these gems dropped in our lap, it's incumbent upon us, I think, to be able to share those. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that already. And
Yeah.
before we sign off, just want to share some ways we can work together. If you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills, I've got everything from online to group to my signature VIP experiences to help you leverage your innate power to be able to negotiate your best life, getting more of what you want and deserve. If that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com. And make sure to grab a copy of my book, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, if you have not done that already. And that is a wrap for this episode. Until next time, go forth, negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.